The first thing I need to tell you is that I didn't know there were expectations. Not the way I am about to describe them to you. Nobody sat me down before the wedding and explained what Amish marriage meant after the guests went home and the last buggy rolled out of the lane. Nobody handed me a list. Nobody said, "Here is what your husband is allowed to want from you. Here is how often. Here is what it means if you cannot give it. Here is what the community will do when they find out." I was 19 years old. I had been raised my whole life to be a good wife, and I failed at it before my first week was over. My name is Ruth, and this is Hannah the Amish Girl, the channel where the stories that were never supposed to leave the farmhouse finally get told out loud. I grew up Old Order Amish in Holmes County, Ohio, the third daughter of a family that farmed 80 acres and never once talked about the things I am going to tell you today. If these stories have ever made you feel like someone finally said the thing you always knew but never heard spoken, please subscribe and tap the like button. It is free, and it keeps these words alive. And tell me in the comments, did anyone ever prepare you for marriage? Or did you also walk through that door not knowing what was waiting on the other side? Because I walked through it. And what was on the other side was something I had no language for. I want to tell you what Amish husbands are allowed to expect. But first I need to tell you what Amish girls are taught, because you cannot understand one without the other. From the time I was old enough to sit still at the kitchen table and listen, I was taught that a wife's body belongs to her husband the way a field belongs to the farmer who tends it. Those were not the exact words. Nobody said it that plainly. What they said was softer than that and more complicated. What they said was that a wife submits, that submission is love, that love is service, that service is what God designed us for. The bishop preached it. My mother lived it. My grandmother before her lived it. The whole structure of our world was built on top of it, the way a farmhouse is built on a foundation you never see, but which holds everything up. I did not question the foundation. I did not even know it was there to question. I just knew that when I married, I would be a good wife. I had watched my mother be a good wife for all of my childhood. I thought I understood what that meant. I did not understand what that meant. I married Eli in October, the second week of the month, on a cold, bright Tuesday when the maples had already gone red and gold and the air smelled like wood smoke and turned earth. He was 23, the eldest son of a family from the next district over, a quiet man with big hands and a way of standing very still when he was listening that everyone said meant he was steady. My father approved of him. My mother approved of him. My grandmother, who had buried one husband and outlived him by 19 years, looked at Eli across the kitchen the first time he came to call and said afterward, "He will be a reliable man." She said it the way she said everything, like it was already settled, like she was simply reporting a fact that God had already decided. I thought reliable sounded good. I thought reliable sounded safe. What I did not think about, because no one had ever told me to think about it, was what reliable meant at night. The wedding was on a Tuesday because that is the Amish way. Tuesdays and Thursdays, away from the weekend so the farming does not stop. 300 people in my father's barn, the women in their dark dresses, the men on one side and the women on the other, the bishop speaking for 2 hours about the covenant of marriage and the duty of the wife and the headship of the husband. I sat through all of it in my new blue dress with my hands folded and my heart doing something strange and fast inside my chest. I thought I was just nervous about the ceremony. I thought once the vows were said and the meal was eaten and the last buggy was gone, the nerves would settle. I thought the hard part was getting married. I did not know that the harder part came after. We moved into a small house on Eli's family's property, 40 yards from his parents' back door. A white house with green shutters and a narrow porch and a kitchen that smelled like old wood and lye soap. I had 3 days before Eli's work schedule returned to its regular rhythm. 3 days, and then he would be up before 5 for the morning milking, in for breakfast, back out, in for the noon meal, back out, in for supper, and then the evening, and then the night. Nobody had told me about the nights. I want to be precise here because I think precision is the only thing that tells the truth about what I am describing. In Amish marriage, a husband's expectation in the marriage bed is not a quiet, private thing between two people. It is a community expectation. It is a theological expectation. It is written into the understanding of what a wife is for in a way that is so deep and so old that most women inside it never even see it as an expectation at all. It simply feels like the weather. It feels like the shape of the world. It feels like something that has always been true and will always be true. And to question it would be like questioning why winter comes. The expectation is this: a wife does not refuse, not once, not for tiredness, not for illness, not for grief, not for the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that comes from carrying a baby and running a household and canning 40 quarts of beans in a single afternoon, and then being expected to have something left over for the night. A wife does not refuse, because a wife who refuses is doing something worse than being selfish. She is failing her covenant. She is opening, as the bishop in my childhood district used to say, a door for the devil to walk through. I had been hearing that phrase my whole life. I had never once applied it to myself. I had been so certain I would never be the woman who opened that door. I failed before the first week was over. Here is what happened. It was the 5th night of our marriage. I had spent the day trying to learn the geography of a kitchen that was not mine, trying to figure out where Eli's mother kept things, trying to make a supper that would be right, trying to be everything I had been raised to be, all at once, in a house that still smelled like strangers. I had not slept well in 4 nights, because sleeping next to someone is a thing you have to learn, and I had not learned it yet. And I was so tired by the 5th evening that I sat down on the edge of the bed to take off my shoes, and I almost did not get back up. I said it quietly. I said, "Eli, I am so tired tonight. I think I just need to sleep." He did not say anything. He lay down beside me, and he turned his face toward the ceiling. And he was so still that I thought maybe it was all right. Maybe he understood. Maybe this one time it would simply be fine. I fell asleep almost immediately. In the morning, he was already gone to the barn when I came downstairs. He came in for breakfast and ate while I stood at the stove, and he said nothing to me directly, only answered when I spoke to him. Short, clean answers that told me nothing, except that something had shifted in the air between us. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself he was just tired too, just quiet the way he always was, just being the steady, reliable man my grandmother had promised me. By the noon meal, I knew I was not imagining it. By supper, I knew something had happened that I did not have words for yet. The silence was not angry exactly. It was not cold the way a man is cold when he is punishing you. It was more like a door that had been open was now simply closed. And I was standing on the wrong side of it and did not know how I had gotten there. I want to stop here and ask you something. Have you ever done something so ordinary, so small, so human, and then watched the world around you rearrange itself in response to it without anyone ever explaining why? That is what the next week felt like. I had said I was tired. That was the whole of what I had done. And what followed was a kind of recalibration of the world I was living in that I could feel but could not name. On the 3rd day of the silence, Eli's mother came over. She came the way Amish women come, without announcement, with something in her hands, a loaf of bread, a jar of apple butter, some reason that was not the real reason. She sat at my kitchen table and drank coffee, and asked about my adjustment to the new house, and talked about the weather, and said 3 sentences about her son that were not really about her son at all. She said, "Eli works very hard, and he carries a great deal, and he needs his home to be a place of peace." She said it pleasantly, looking at her coffee cup, her voice warm as something baked. I said, "Yes." I said, "Of course." I said, "I understood." She nodded and finished her coffee and left. And I stood in my kitchen after she was gone and understood for the first time that I had already become a subject of conversation in a house 40 yards away from my own. What I did not know yet was that this was only the beginning of how the system worked. What happens in Amish marriage when a wife fails her expectation is not what you might expect if you are picturing something loud or violent or dramatic. What happens is much quieter and much larger than that. It does not come from the husband alone. It comes from everywhere at once, slowly, the way weather comes. So gradually you keep thinking it will pass, and then one morning you realize it has not passed, and it is not going to pass. And you are standing inside it with no coat and no shelter and only one door that leads back into the warmth. I did not know any of this on the 5th night when I said I was tired. I did not know any of this on the 3rd day when my mother-in-law sat at my table talking about peace. I was still telling myself I had simply had a difficult week and things would settle. I was still telling myself that Eli was a good man and good men understood exhaustion. I kept waiting for the silence to end on its own. It did not end on its own. What ended it was me. On the 8th night, I did not say I was tired. I did not say anything at all. I simply let the night happen, and in the morning the door was open again, and Eli passed the salt at breakfast and looked at me when I spoke, and the world returned to its regular shape. And I sat across the table from him and watched him eat and thought, so this is what it costs. This is the exact price of a single night. I had not known the price before. Now I knew it. And knowing the price is not the same as being free of it. Knowing the price is simply knowing what you will be charged every single time. I want to tell you about the woman who finally explained it to me. Her name was Anna, and she was 61 years old, a widow who had married at 17 and been married for 40 years before her husband died, and who moved through the community like someone who had seen everything there was to see and had made her peace with most of it. She found me at a quilting circle 3 months after my wedding. She sat beside me, and we stitched in silence for a long time before she spoke. She did not look at me when she spoke. She looked at the quilt. She said, "The expectation does not go away with time, but you go away with time. You learn how to be somewhere else while you are there. You learn how to leave the part of you that needs to rest somewhere safe, where it cannot be reached. And you bring the rest of yourself back in the morning." She said it the way she said everything, plainly, without apology, without self-pity. The way you tell someone how to dress a wound, because the wound is already there, and it is not going to close on its own. And the kindest thing is to tell the truth about how to tend it. I stared at my hands on the quilt. I said, "Does it ever get easier?" She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Easier is not the right word. You become practiced. Practiced is different from easy. Easy means it does not cost you anything. Practiced means you have learned exactly what it costs, and you have arranged your life around that cost." She paused. She said, "Some women call that peace. I call it arithmetic." I have thought about that word almost every day since she said it. Arithmetic. Not love, not covenant, not submission. Arithmetic. The careful management of what you have against what you owe. The daily calculation of what you can afford to give without losing something you cannot replace. Anna had done that arithmetic for 40 years. She had sat beside a man she had been given to at 17, and she had done the numbers every single night, and she had survived it, and she had called the surviving peace, and she had believed it, because the only other word for it would have required a courage she did not have access to inside the life she was living. I stayed for 3 more years. I will not tell you today why I left or how I left or what the leaving cost, because that story belongs to a different video, and I am not ready to tell it all at once. But I will tell you what I know now that I did not know on my wedding night. I know that what was done to me, quietly, without violence, without a single raised voice, has a name in the outside world. My therapist gave me the name slowly, the way you give someone medicine, one small dose at a time. The name is coercive control. The name is conditional affection used as leverage. The name is a system that makes the cost of saying no so high that yes stops being a choice and becomes the only surviving option. In my community, none of those names existed. We had only one name for it. We called it being a good wife. And I was a good wife. I was a very good wife. I was so good at it that for 3 years, I barely existed at all. If you grew up somewhere that taught you your body was owed to someone else, I see you. If you ever lay awake in the dark doing arithmetic, counting what you had left against what the night was going to take, I see you. If you were ever told that a good woman does not refuse, that refusal is selfishness, that selfishness is sin, and you believed it because everyone around you believed it and the world you lived in was built on top of that belief, I see you. You were not weak. You were not failing. You were surviving inside a system that was designed to make sure the cost of no was always higher than you could afford to pay. Anna died the year after I left. I heard about it through a letter that reached me months after the fact, passed along through a chain of people who still knew where I was. I sat with that letter for a long time. I thought about her hands on the quilt. I thought about the word arithmetic. I thought about 40 years of careful calculation and the way she had called the surviving piece, and the way I had understood even then that she was not lying exactly, only using the only word her world had given her for what she was feeling. She is why I know how to say what I am saying today. She is why I know the name for what we were doing, even though she never knew the name herself. She gave me the truth when she did not have to, in the only language she had. And the truth was enough. If this story reached something in you, please tell me in the comments. Tell me what stayed with you. Tell me if you had your own Anna, a woman who sat beside you and told you the truth in the only words available to her. And if you want to keep hearing the stories from behind the prayer cap, the ones that were never supposed to leave the farmhouse, subscribe to Hannah the Amish Girl. There is so much more I still have to say. And before you go, I want to ask you something honestly. More than 90% of the people who watch these videos still have not subscribed. And I understand that. But if any part of what I said today made you feel seen, if any part of it names something you have carried without a name for a long time, I hope you will stay. It is free, and it helps these words keep reaching the people who need them. Until next time, remember this. Your tiredness was never a sin. It was just tiredness, and you deserved rest.